You're listening to The Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to The Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and you know what it is. That time again, Tuesday morning, Monday Night Football, doubleheader in the rearview mirror, and it is time once again to rank all 32 teams from worst to first through our tier list. I will say there was a ton of movement in this weekend's power rankings. There is so much to discuss, so much to get into about teams moving around. I had to expand the number one overall pick category. There's a brand new number one at the top of the board, so I invite you all, comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts. Let me hear your rankings, even if it's not all 32. Give me a top 10, a top 5. Would love to hear from you all. But we're looking at last week's rankings. We'll turn the page, reset the board. And like I said, I had to make room for a new team in the number one overall pick category because at this point, there are so many teams sitting on 3 wins right now, coupled with the fact that you have a couple of 2-win teams as well in the Raiders and Giants. That pick is so up in the air right now with just how many teams are sitting at the bottom of the barrel. It could really go either way depending on how a few games break these next few weeks. So, without further ado, we're diving in. The bottom of the barrel, the worst of them all. At number 32, the New York Giants are front and center. The Raiders are above them at 31, Patriots at 30, Titans at 29, Browns at 28, Jaguars at 27, and then the Panthers are going to round out the group at number 26. The Giants allowing 445 yards of offense in this game. Defense managed just 2 stops on third down, allowing the Baltimore Ravens to go a whopping 9 for 11. Not too often you get a stat line like that on third down. Tim Boyle had the opportunity to come in and replace Tommy DeVito, who got concussed during the matchup here. And I think the really the only good thing you can take away from this game is at least Malik Neighbors, despite the struggles that we've just been seeing from this Giants team all season long, is still getting the ball, still putting up some numbers, so you have something to look forward to going into next season. He had 10 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown. This is talk about coming to a crash and burn at the very end of the season for the New York Giants right now. The Raiders right above them at number 31, falling to 2-12 as they lost on Monday Night Football to the Atlanta Falcons. I will say, round of applause for the Raiders on this one, because I thought that the Falcons might get to a more comfortable victory. I did not anticipate it coming down to literally a Hail Mary into the end zone that ultimately ended in an interception for Atlanta. But with nothing to play for, your number one overall pick potential is basically as good as anybody's. You're only really behind the Giants at this current point right now. You have the opportunity to control the draft, and you're still just playing every single game, fighting to the finish line. So I've got to respect that. There's a lot of people right now on the roster, on the coaching staff, fighting for their jobs, and I do think it says a lot about them that even with all of that opportunity there, I would assume a lot of those people know we're probably not going to be around for that number one potentially overall selection, so screw that. Let's just give it what we got and see what we can do, trying to play disruptors, if you will, but ultimately coming up short. Defense at least kept them in the game. Desmond Ridder, though, a couple of interceptions. You ran for 65 yards of total offense on the ground, 4 for 14 on third down. Not going to typically result in a win, but the fact that you were in it at that very end of the football game, I tip my cap and respect that effort. The Patriots right above them at number 30. This looked like a team that did not know coming out of the bye week they had a football game to play, if I'm being completely honest. They started losing in the trenches very early on in that game, and you felt it. The offense kind of buttoned up, and just it did not feel like they were willing to really take any risks. And I mean, you're down 23-3 in the fourth quarter, and the fact that this game ended 30-17 is kind of a blessing because it disguises if you're somebody on the outside looking in who did not watch this game, fortunately for you, you probably think, oh, the Patriots hung around. No, that was garbage time points going up on the board. The final score made this game look a lot closer than it actually was, and had it not been for some late game heroics from Drake May, you're talking a complete and literal blowout performance by the Patriots, and it was just not good in any way, shape, or form. This team is spiraling. It feels like out of control right now. And as somebody who works in the New England sports media, I obviously get to hear it a lot more than I do everything else. But this is a team that is spiraling out of control. Fans are sick and tired of it already, and we are not even a year into the Gerard Mayo experience. And on top of that, they've turned on the front office as well with Elliott Wolf and company there. There's a piece of me that feels like nothing is going to change, and that's crazy to me. But then there's the person who is thinking logically going, you've got to change something, right? And I don't think just canning coordinators and trying again next season is really the answer here. I'm curious to see what the Patriots do, because it feels like every single week it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I don't know how you walk out of this season with potentially fewer wins than last year and you go, well, we'll try it again next year and see what we do with Mayo. Just crazy to me. Titans sitting at number 29 right in front of them there. Another 3 interceptions from Will Levis. Actually, in my prediction for that game when I was previewing the matchup, I literally said you never really know what you're going to get from Will Levis here. It sometimes is a good performance, or you get the, hat trick trifecta of interceptions with a pick 6 involved as well. And I'm kind of surprised that Tennessee waited until that 3rd interception to actually make the change there, because Mason Rudolph came in, and yes, he threw an interception too, but after that, and a fumble as well, not from him specifically, but just in general, this offense found some sort of rhythm, and ultimately losing by 10 in obviously garbage time, but found a little bit of a spark with Mason Rudolph under center. So I don't really know where this team goes, to be completely honest with you. The offense is a really big mess and needs a lot of work, but thankfully, you do have some pieces on the defensive side of the ball that you can really build around and work towards, just putting together a formidable unit to help what I would assume is potentially a young quarterback incoming. I would assume that Tennessee is probably looking for something like that, roughly, and is probably in the mix for a quarterback this draft. So at least you have some semblance of a solid defense to build off of going into next year right now. But the offense, I think, is going to see a lot of changes. Tony Pollard, though, not one of them. I think that there is going to be a lot of facelifting that needs to be done, though. The Browns sitting at number 28 here. Jameis Winston, another 3 interceptions and ultimately getting benched for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But the big thing coming out of this game is, of course, Nick Chubb, who it sounds like a broken foot, is going to miss the remainder of the season. And you want to talk about somebody who just does not deserve the bad luck that they have been getting here, because of just how much he loves Cleveland, the heart and soul that he has put into that city, and how he was willing to take a restructured deal to come back after the big injury, and because he wanted to play in Cleveland and be in Cleveland. And it's been a grind for him to get back, and then it's been a grind since he's been back to really get anything going here. So to have this happen to him, I hate it for Nick Chubb. I really do. Jerry Jeudy's kind of the big bright spot you have coming out of this season here, which seemed like a really questionable trade to begin with. But now in hindsight, the way he's been playing as basically the number 1 wide receiver for Cleveland, he's looked really good over there. Granted, he might be benefiting from the fact that Jameis Winston's just kind of saying, F it, Jerry Jeudy's somewhere out there, and maybe he'll catch the ball. I don't know, but I'll be curious to see if he sticks around in Cleveland for the long haul, because it's an interesting trade that seems to be working out pretty well for Cleveland, despite everything else around them going in the gutter. The Jaguars at 27. I don't really know how to fairly assess this football team, because they are in such a weird state. I feel like they've been in a limbo, and the Jaguars beating the Patriots in London has complicated what I think would already be a decision made had they lost to the Patriots in London, because the way I see it, I don't really know how you run it back another season with just how bad this team is. And I understand you've missed Trevor Lawrence for a lot of this season here, and that's really hurt the Jaguars, but there is a lot more wrong with this team than just Trevor Lawrence missing time, because even when Trevor Lawrence was playing, things did not look great offensively, and this defense has been god-awful, especially trying to defend the pass. So there's a lot going wrong here, and if Mac Jones isn't your quarterback, I mean, maybe you potentially win this game, and I don't really understand where Mac Jones is coming from with some of the celebrations you're getting from him in this game. I mean, you're playing on a team that at the time is 3-10, and you're celebrating like every minor or semi, good play. It's just a very weird look for a team that's currently sitting at 3-11 right now. Brian Thomas Jr., awesome. Glad to see that he's finding so much success in Jacksonville. I think there's a positive you could at least take away from this game in him. But this is a team that I also think is kind of on the fast track, and we're going to see some changes here. The Panthers, rounding out the group at number 26 here, crash back down to earth type of game for the Panthers here. Aside from a big play from Jalen Coker, you really did not get much offensively out of this team here. Bryce Young was very up and down, and I've seen a handful of people call this a bit of a regression game for him after he's been showing some promise over the last month or so since he's returned from his benching here. The defense cannot stop a nosebleed on the ground, and that is something that we have been talking about here on the channel for quite some time as well, and we saw that with Rico Dowdle looking more like, pick your favorite running back's name and insert it there, because having nearly 160 yards on the ground for Rico Dowdle is not something I had on my bingo card. I thought the Cowboys might be able to find a way to run. I was not expecting that kind of performance there, but just a tough way to finish this week for the Panthers here, getting decimated by a team that's kind of down and out and in a bad way themselves, all things considered injury-wise, but a team that is, again, very well in the mix for that number one overall selection. And because of what they did this week and where they stand record-wise, I had to expand this group. I had been hard set on not allowing myself to go beyond 6 teams in the number one overall pick category, but just with how tight the race is between all these 3-11 teams and the couple of 2-12 teams we had, I figured, you know what, we're nearing the end of the season. I held on for as long as I could with the 6 teams, but it is a horse race for that number one overall selection right now, and there's a lot of bad to go around and some teams that are really looking to get some of those, I would say, top 5 picks or so. Moving into the struggle bus category, those teams that maybe aren't picking somewhere within the top 5, but they will definitely be picking early in the draft here. To begin the category at number 25, we are looking at the Chicago Bears. The Jets are at 24, the Saints at 23, Colts at 22, Cowboys at 21, and then the 49ers round out the group at number 20, sitting at 6 and 8 here. So the Bears, it's bad in Chicago, and I think you could just very simply put it that way. This feels like a team that was quitting on Matt Eberflus, and you were hoping that maybe there would be a little bit of a motivational boost with the firing of him, but it feels like this team maybe just completely deflated. It was like a tire losing air, and you from a nail, and you pull the nail out, and ultimately the tire just completely deflates. And that kind of feels like the state of the Chicago Bears right now. They never really stood a chance in this matchup against the Vikings here. And it's not too long ago we watched the Bears take the Minnesota Vikings all the way into overtime. Really tight loss, but still took them all the way to overtime. In this game, it was like a completely different team, and it was not good, to say the least. The Jets at 24, finally getting their first win, and it basically took a defenseless, Mac Jones-led Jacksonville Jaguars team to get yourself that W on the back of Aaron Rodgers and what was nearly a 300-yard performance at 289 with 3 touchdowns thrown. Davante Adams had himself a monster performance, looking like the Davante Adams of old with a couple of touchdowns and 198 yards. I am very interested in what this Jets team looks like next year, because I personally have no idea how this is going to go. We've seen the general manager be fired. We've seen the head coach be fired. And now there's so much conversation surrounding the future of Aaron Rodgers in New York. And even with this win, it basically means nothing. I don't really think that this win and this performance between, the 2 big pieces that were brought in for this season here, Davante Adams more specifically, obviously Rodgers missing last year, being brought in the year prior, but still, this was supposed to be, you brought in Aaron Rodgers, things were going south, you brought in Adams to help elevate this offense. You hadn't really gotten a big performance. You finally get it now, but it obviously too little too late at 4-10. I'm very curious to see what happens here. If Aaron Rodgers is allowed to come back next year by the ownership or management, head coach, whoever it is that's going to be leading the way over there in New York next season, or if he just opts to retire, ride out into the sunset, and Davante Adams maybe is allowed to go somewhere else, I have no clue what's going to happen, but I'm very intrigued by it. The Saints sitting at number 23, I've got to say, I did not anticipate a Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler-led Saints to damn near take the Commanders down in what is kind of a meaningless football game for them right now. Another one of those teams that really has nothing to play for at this point in the season other than pride. And the fact that you took the Commanders literally to the final second of the game. Clock is at 0. You scored a touchdown. I would say maybe not the best play call going for 2 in that situation there. But overall, I mean, just surprised, I guess, to say the least here. I did not peg the Saints without Derek Carr in the current situation that they are and the fact that they had to work with both their backup quarterbacks in this game here. I did not peg the Saints to be hanging around the way they did. So credit to New Orleans, even if it was in New Orleans. On top of that, like I just did not expect this to be the outcome of this game, whether it was a loss or just I just expected it to be a blowout. So I was very much blown away with the way this game turned itself out. The Colts are sitting at number 22. At 6-8, between Anthony Richardson's struggles, you also had Jonathan Taylor letting go of the football right before he crosses the end zone, and then Adonai Mitchell's not pick six, fumble six that he threw to Nick Bonito. This, for those of you who don't know, if you're maybe new or it's just not something I reference a ton, I grew up rooting for the Colts fan. My fandom died a bit when Andrew Luck retired, so I still follow the Colts like my favorite team. I don't live and die by them by any means, though, and any fandom bias I had is out the window. Like, believe me. And this is a team that needs to lose out because the Colts have been sitting around this like roughly 500 purgatory for way too long, competing and being maybe better than the sum of their parts the last handful of seasons. And this is a team that I would not be mad to see them kind of just bottom out, finish the season 6-11, and be picking somewhere in the upper portion of the draft. I think this team could benefit from that. It'd help with the infusion of youth on this roster that I think is needed here, especially with some interesting situations regarding the offensive line and just a few other, the secondary as well, which is already very young and inexperienced, but there definitely needs to be more talent there. Obviously, injuries have hurt this team as well, but this team just needs a lot. So I'd be okay with them losing for the sake of getting better draft picks here. But I've been out for a while on Anthony Richardson, and there has not really been a lot that makes me feel differently to this point, and I don't really know what the Colts are going to do come season end here, because you'd have to think maybe they give Richardson one more shot next year, but I'm assuming there's going to be a semi-short leash, and Shane Steichen's job will be on the line, I would have to imagine, with that as well. So intriguing offseason coming up for the Colts here, but in the interim, like if you want to lose the next 3 games, wouldn't be too mad. At number 21, the Dallas Cowboys, smelling blood in the water, well aware that they had won the battle in the trenches. Micah Parsons leading the way. This team was not going to let up here. And listen, at 6-8, playoffs are a bit of a pipe dream. You would need a lot to go your way. You would need teams to basically be losing out, and a handful of teams at that, coupled with winning out yourselves the rest of the way in this season. In my opinion, I look at Dallas, especially in the current state they are, just health-wise. This is a team that does not really have anything to play for, and I don't really think needs to be battling for a potential playoff spot, but I respect the effort that we're still getting from this team here, all things considered. Like Rico Dowdle going for 150 yards in this game. You got 3 touchdowns from Cooper Rush. I mean, you love to see it, I guess you could say, from a team that doesn't really have much to play for here. Again, the odds are so stacked against Dallas, but for them to come out, and listen, I get it. It's the Carolina Panthers. They have not been too great themselves over there, but they looked better than a 6-8 team, I guess you could say, against the Panthers. We'll see what the Cowboys do over these next few weeks here. Again, they're in the playoff hunt, but not a team that I'm really looking at going, all right, we'll see them come January. They're like just kind of playing with like bought time at this point right now. Another team that I'm really intrigued to see, though, what happens going forward, because you have money tied up in some really big positions. And on top of that, head coach Mike McCarthy Contract expires at the end of the season here. Another team with another high-profile team at that, too. Big market, big fandom. Very interested to see what happens with Dallas. And then the 49ers rounding out the group at number 20 here. The best way I can put this is that this team feels broken. This extends back to even before the season started, from the drama surrounding contract negotiations coming into the year, to the injuries that have just been piling up all season long, to like what felt like the secrecy surrounding Christian McCaffrey, and then ultimately his absence being months as opposed to what people thought was, maybe he might play for in like a week or two because he's missing this first couple of games, and it turns into he's gone for however long, and then ultimately comes back and then goes down for the remainder of the season, essentially here, to the Devondre Campbell situation where apparently, according to Nick Bosa, he heard him complaining prior to the game. He's refusing to join or get on the field during the game, and now being suspended the final 3 games of the season. You have people asking Kyle Shanahan his thoughts on potentially being traded elsewhere. There is a lot of drama going on in San Francisco right now. I do think, though, that a lot of this, and because they're coming off of a Super Bowl appearance, maybe it's a little bit more amplified. Like, yes, 6-8 is not where you wanted to be right now. You are a division favorite coming into this season, sitting at the bottom of a division behind a team like the Cardinals at this current point here. But there is definitely a lot of unfortunate circumstance surrounding this team at the current moment here, and I think the injury bug really bit this team hard out of the gate, and they just could never really collect themselves. I don't really know where they're going to go from here. They've got a tough final few games where there's no real shoe-in bet to win. So this another team I'm just interested to see how the rest of the season plays out, because there's, again, the remainder of their schedule. It's not the hardest in the world, but there's no guarantee based off of where they stand and where their opponents upcoming stand. Going into the Jeff Fisher category, teams right around 500, flirting with a potential shot at the playoffs, just on the outside looking in. At number 19, we have the Miami Dolphins. At 18, the Bengals. At 17, the Cardinals. At 16, the Falcons. And then the Seahawks rounding out the group. A pretty small Jeff Fisher category, all things considered, from what we've had this season. Miami could not afford to take a loss this week, but ultimately they did. They just got completely beat at the line of scrimmage offensively. And, I mean, Houston, for what it's worth, has a pretty vaunting defensive front. They've been a pretty tough unit to deal with all season long. They couldn't run the football. They were not able to convert on third downs. They could not get the football to their playmakers. Aside from Jonnu Smith, who is kind of like the bright spot that I take away from this game here. Yeah, the 3 interceptions from Tua. It was just a bit of a nightmare altogether offensively. But Jonnu Smith, and this is someone who's having a really quiet, low-key good season, flirting with maybe 1,000 yards this year. He's having a career season, to say the least. 70 receptions, 740 yards, 6 touchdowns on the year. I'll be honest, I don't track each and every single player's stat line throughout the entire league. When I happened to stumble across the numbers as I was doing, my notes and whatnot for this video here. And when I saw Jonnu Smith with that stat line, I was like, really? Just somebody that is low-key having... And I've been aware of, especially the last few weeks, some of the big plays that Jonnu Smith has made for Miami. I just didn't realize how much he was actually doing for this offense. So tip my cap to that. Someone who's kind of journeyed his way around the league the last handful of years. It's funny because Patriots fans and all the lack of weapons that they have over there struggling to move the football are sitting there actively wondering where they could get guys that could maybe make plays for them. And they had someone like Jonnu Smith literally on their roster last year that they could not do a damn thing with. And now here he is, 70 receptions, 750 yards essentially, and 6 scores. Interesting. Hoping Miami can keep him around because he's been a really big piece for them. The Bengals at number 18. In a game where you turned the ball over 4 times, it was not a perfect performance by any means. You're just lucky that Tennessee was willing to give the football away 6 times, which is crazy. A football game that totaled a whopping 10 turnovers, but you get the job done. Joe Burrow breaking his own franchise record for passing touchdowns in a single season of 35, now moving up with 36, and he's got 3 games to go. So the Bengals are a fringe playoff team, and emphasis on the fringe right now because the AFC race is a bit tight. However, with the way that the Chargers are currently looking right now, with no run game to speak of, the Bengals have to keep winning. They need the Chargers to keep losing. There is a potential path for them to sneak in, but it all starts with them. You got to keep winning, and you got to hope that some of these teams that are sitting around 8-6 or 9-5, I guess you could say, stumble the final 3 games of the season here. The Cardinals at 7-7. I don't really have a ton on them because you're going into a game against the Patriots, and the way that they have looked this season, you want to come in an ideal situation, you stomp them out, you make them look like the lesser opponent that they are, and especially how competitive Arizona has been, and in my opinion, surprisingly. But again, another team that I did not see being able to put up what they've done this season, but they are 7-7 for a reason. To come in, you beat down a lesser opponent, keep your playoff hopes alive in a very tight race in the NFC West. Couldn't really ask for much more. So, good performance altogether. And again, like I said when we were talking the Patriots, yeah, that game ended 30-17, but it might as well have been 30-3 because it was garbage time scoring that the Patriots are putting together at the final minutes of that football game. Falcons at 7-7. I've got to say, you had one bright spot offensively in this game in what was a bit of a mess of a contest from start to finish here. I would have expected the Falcons to handle the Raiders a little bit more convincingly, and like I had said earlier with the Raiders, not anticipate this game coming down to the wire the way it did, where you needed a game-sealing interception to ultimately win. But Bijan Robinson had himself a good performance. Kirk Cousins finally threw a touchdown to Drake London. He threw another interception on top of that, but he finally breaks what I think was a 4-game streak without throwing a touchdown. So something is up with Kirk. I'm very curious to see if it's the Achilles or something like that, but he has just not looked himself the last month or so, and my only logical thought is it's got to be the Achilles, I guess, if maybe something happened and maybe it's starting to bother him, or something else has popped up that is maybe giving him issues, and maybe it's compounding where he just has not quite been able to get that trust back in that leg on top of something else. Like, I don't know. I'm interested in seeing what the answer to that winds up being come season's end here. The Falcons are still fighting for the NFC South. They, however, at this moment don't control their destiny because the Buccaneers are sitting at 8-6. The best you can do is just keep winning football games and hope Tampa Bay drops another one because you do have the tiebreaker having swept them here, but tough look for the Falcons right now. And the Seahawks rounding out the group at 8-6 here. It sounds like Geno Smith could be good to go against Minnesota next week, but this is a rough situation to be in, and it really just kind of goes back to the offensive line. And this is something that I know Seahawks fans have been pointing out to me, if not every week, every other week, and if I fail to mention it, I certainly hear about it in the comment section. The offensive line, 7 more sacks allowed this season. They're still in the fight. You're 8-6. You have an opportunity to control your destiny here. You've got a tough road in doing so because you got to play Minnesota this week coming up, and you also at the back end of the season you have to beat the Rams on top of that. If the Rams don't drop another game between now and then, and you continue to win out, if that's possible, but. Man, this is not the place you want to be in. The running game has been struggling. Zach Charbonnet had, a few good plays, and Jackson Smith-Njigba continues to look really, really good. He feels like he's kind of taken that next step for this offense here, but not a great situation to be in right now. Health concerns regarding your star quarterback as you're going to play Minnesota now, who at this point really feels like they can do no wrong with how good their defense has been over there. So very much still in the fight, but the playoff hopes are kind of teetering right now with everything that's going on in Seattle. Now, looking at the playoff hopefuls, as we always do, our reminder, there must be 7 AFC teams, 7 NFC teams. All 4 division leaders need to be included here. And then, of course, you have the remaining 3 wildcard teams per conference. So, that being said, at the number 14 spot, the Chargers. At number 13, the Rams. At 12, the Buccaneers. At 11, the Commanders. At 10, the Broncos. 9, the Texans. 8 for the Ravens. And then at number 7, rounding out the group, we are looking at the Green Bay Packers. So, the Chargers, with no running game to speak of right now, you are still in the playoffs, but you are in danger of falling out of the playoffs the way I see it right now. This offense, simply put, does not have enough skill talent at this current moment right now with their current situation health-wise to be able to hang with some of the better offenses right now. The defense folding in the second half because the offense just could not really get anything going. Losing J.K. Dobbins has really hurt this football team. The balance is completely out the window, and unless they can find some semblance of a running game going forward, I'm a little bit worried about the Chargers right now, and we kind of highlighted them a little bit when I was talking about the Bengals earlier. If the Chargers lose out and the Bengals win out, there is your opportunity to sneak into the playoffs if you're Cincinnati. And if you remember, coming into this season, there were places, and I didn't agree with this. I considered the Patriots the worst skill group in the NFL coming into this season. There were some people who were pegging the Chargers at number 32 and putting the Patriots at 31. Obviously, Ladd McConkey has exceeded a lot of people's expectations. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins, when he was healthy, looked really, really good with this offense. And, I mean, Quentin Johnston continues to have issues dropping the football, but I mean, when he does catch the football, good things do happen. It's just a consistency issue. Pretty good unit, but right now, in the current state that they are with the health issues that they're dealing with, the Chargers are in a tough spot. They just have to hang on. They just have to hang on. If they can do that, they can still slip into the playoffs and have a shot, but the Bengals are nipping at their heels right now, and the Chargers cannot afford to lose more games. The Rams at number 13, sitting at 8-6, now leading the NFC West in the pouring rain, winning 12-6. They get the job done against a San Francisco 49ers team that is falling apart at the tail end of the season right now. You got big performances from your guys, Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams, to help set you up for the 4 field goals that you had. And the defense playing extremely well here. Listen, he's not Aaron Donald, but Aaron Donald clearly has left his mark on some of these guys on the defensive line, and no bigger mark, in my opinion, than Kobe Turner, who is continuing to turn out some really good games and performances, if not every week, every other week. He had a hell of a game with a couple of sacks, couple tackles for loss this week, and the defense coming up when it mattered most as Darius Williams took that interception very late in that football game to basically seal the deal for you. This Rams team is playing some good football. They're winning big games. This one against a division rival. The week prior, you took down the Bills. We've seen enough from the Rams, in my opinion, now that they're a legit playoff contender. I wouldn't say that they're a Super Bowl contender at this current state, but they're able to slip their way into the playoffs, and I think they could make some noise. And there may be a team that could upset somebody in the wild card round, push their way to the divisional round. So don't sleep on not Tampa Bay. Don't sleep on the Rams. They are looking good so far. And then the Bucs right above them, 8-6. This is their division to lose right now, as Mike Evans is currently working for that 1,000-yard season. I am rooting for you, Mike Evans, and I know all of Tampa Bay is as well. He needs just 84 yards per game to make sure he secures that record. If he can do that, he'll hit the 1,000-yard mark, and I'm sure Baker Mayfield knows that and is going to get him the football if he can. And on top of that, just the overall balance, like stat numbers aside, the balance of this offense right now in its current state is incredible. And I cannot get over the turnaround that this team is having, because last season, this was one of the worst rushing attacks. I can't remember if they were 32, but they were somewhere in the 30s. This was one of the worst rushing offenses in the NFL, period. They could not move the football on the ground. Now you have a game like this one where Baker Mayfield's thrown for 288 yards, and then on top of that, your team as a whole is rushing for another 223 on the ground. You've got a 3-headed monster you can work with out of the backfield with White, Tucker, and Irving. So at this point right now, your offense is humming. The defense, even with some of the injuries that they're dealing with, is playing pretty well. And if those guys continue to get healthy and get back before the playoff starts, this is another team getting healthy at the right time. I trust in Baker Mayfield. I love the play that he has. Yes, it comes with a lot of interceptions sometimes, but he's a gamer. He's a gunslinger, and he trusts his arm, and he just plays angry, and it's so fun to watch. The Buccaneers, if they catch the right team at the right time, this is a team that could go on a run. Commanders at number 11. Listen, you get the win. You basically escaped with the win. This game, in a sense, in my opinion, and honestly, if you wanted to put the Commanders below maybe like the Bucs or the Rams after watching this game, I get it. I'm giving them some benefit of the doubt because they have 9 wins to the other two teams 8. This game, though, in a sense, kind of reminds you that the Commanders are overachieving big time. I don't think anyone really pegged them to be being this good and in the playoff hunt the way they are, sitting at 9-5. They're lucky to have come away with a win. You can say in some instances, and I do say this a lot, good teams, when they put themselves in bad situations, find ways to win. They did kind of do that in a sense, but like I said earlier, I look at the play call that the Saints decided to go with, going for 2 there, gambling to try to just put this game away and get the win with all the injuries they were dealing with and everyone going down in the game. Lucky that things broke the way you did, but take that luck, rebound next week, and come back with a better performance is kind of what I would say coming out of this one. Broncos at number 10, sitting at 9-5. Nick Bonito, who, if you are just hearing about him this year, started this last year. This is not something new in Denver. Nick Bonito started last year and had himself a pretty good performance last season. Is now quietly having and unfortunately, because you have Pat Surtain on the same team, it's easy to overlook him and he's not as known of a name. Nick Bonito's quietly having a defensive player of the year type of season. Maybe it's not quite as glamorous as some of the other guys. I'm talking candidacy more than anything else. 11.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. He now has the fumble 6 that he got off of A.D. Mitchell. He has an interception. I mean, he's an anchor for what is, in my opinion, and this is nothing new. I've been saying this for at least the last month and a half or so. It feels like the leader of one of the best pass rushes in the NFL, if not the best pass rush in the NFL, and one of the best just defensive fronts as a whole. So you look at what he's doing, leading this unit. They came away with 4 takeaways in this game, and if you want to add the 5th one with the Jonathan Taylor fumble into the end zone for a touchback, you could say 5 if you want to, because the stat sheet technically does. This is a championship level defense. Now, Bo Nix looked a little vulnerable this week, looked a little bit like a rookie this week. 3 interceptions, not great, but it's been a while since Bo Nix has looked like a rookie quarterback. So I'm very interested, especially at this stage in the season, very interested in how he bounces back from this game and rebounds. But I like Denver the way they're set up right now. Sean Payton is coaching his ass off. This defense is playing at an unbelievable level right now, and you're getting some really good performances from a lot of different people on the offensive side of the football right now. Bo Nix, all eyes are on you coming out of this game. Yes, you walk away from a 1,000-yard view. You see the final score, you go, wow, really good game by Denver. But there's a very important game coming up now. How do you rebound off of what was a pretty tough performance for you as an individual? The Texans at number 9, huge night for the defense, even bigger night for Derek Stingley Jr. with a couple of interceptions and a big interception late in the game to really help seal this victory for Houston. Defense finished with 3 interceptions on the evening against Tua here. And going into this game, I even said it, the Texans' second fastest get-off as the snap happens in the NFL. And that is basically what you need to be able to disrupt a guy like Tua who gets the ball out faster than anybody else in the league. The Miami Dolphins offense is based off of the rhythm and just the flow that they can get into, where it's just Tua does such a great job of managing a football game and I'm not calling him a game manager, but just managing the offense and keeping them on schedule and very much on time, if not early, it feels like in some situations. Wasn't the greatest day offensively. That is definitely a slight concern, but Miami's defense, for what it's worth, has looked a little bit better over the last month-ish or so, especially the defensive front there. So, yeah, there is that, but the defense, really good performance. And anytime you're holding Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to a combined 2 receptions for 36 yards, I'd say you had yourself a pretty good ball game. Ravens at number 8, sitting at 9-5. You got 5 touchdowns from Lamar Jackson, reminding everybody that he should at the very least be considered for the MVP award. There's a lot of people crowning Josh Allen with the award right now, and believe me, I get it, I do. But just remember, Lamar Jackson has had himself a pretty damn good season, and statistically speaking, is having a better season than the last 2 MVP awards he won. So there is that. You got another 130 yards or so between him and Derrick Henry on the ground. My biggest concern really for this team, and it popped up again, they lead the league in penalties committed right now at 117, and they had another 12 for 112 yards in this game on Sunday. Thankfully for them, the Giants suck, and I mean, even if you're giving up a literal football field of free yards, they could not take advantage of that. You will not get away with that type of play against playoff caliber teams and good teams in the NFL. That has to get cleaned up in the next few weeks as we get set for the playoffs here. So just something to keep an eye on there. But the Ravens have been extremely undisciplined throughout the majority of this season. That's got to get cleaned up. Packers at 10-4. Jordan Love's last 4 games have been fantastic, considering where he was prior to those 4 games and just the struggles with the interceptions and dealing with injuries, missing time. And I feel like he was just constantly trying to find himself a rhythm and get back into the swing of things, and he never really had that opportunity, getting hurt literally week 1 in Brazil. So if you look at his last month, 872 yards, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's cleaned up big time. Josh Jacobs continues to look like a money signing for this offense. And the defense, especially the defensive line, and they don't even really have to blitz. It's like those 4 guys up front are really starting to pick up and get the pressure. And yeah, the Seahawks O-line is, in a bit of a state right now and has been for, it feels like, a number of years, to be completely honest. 7 sacks, that's not by luck. We're seeing some really good performances from the Packers over the last month or so. Big-time performance in this game on Sunday Night Football, especially going into Seattle, one of the tougher environments to play in the NFL, in my opinion. I think some other people would agree. Big win for them, and they round out the playoff hopeful section. And to wrap up the top of the NFL, the best 6 of the bunch, sitting at number 6, dropping a spot here, the Pittsburgh Steelers sitting at 10-4. Then we have the Vikings at number 5. We have the Chiefs, 13-1 Chiefs, that is, sitting at number 4. The Lions dropping from number 1 down to number 3 with their loss to Buffalo. The Bills, and we'll get into this in a minute here, only moving up to number 2, and then the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles, claiming the number 1 spot, riding a 10-game winning streak right now. Here's the deal. With the Steelers, you only had 3 offensive drives go for more than 4 plays. That right there alone is a problem. And time of possession was lost by essentially a 2-to-1 ratio? Maybe that's not the right way to put that. You had the ball for a third of the game, is to put it simply. 3 of 10 on third down. And this is not the first time that we've seen this Steelers offense struggle and have to settle for field goals, not being able to finish drives. This was a jarring performance for a team that I really thought was starting to figure it out offensively. And I don't know if this game speaks more to just where the Eagles' defense is or where this Steelers offense is. This is definitely something we need to keep a close eye on the next few weeks here. I still think the Steelers defense, one of the best units in the NFL, will be a big reason why this team can make some noise come January. But as of right now, with some of the hiccups we've seen from this offense just through the duration of the season, whether it's with Russell Wilson or when Justin Fields is under center, we've seen it, and it's kind of like a consistent thing that's come up. Keep an eye on this offense, because I thought they were really starting to find a rhythm, and just they flat out could not run the football, could not really get a lot going through the air. Just an overall not a great performance. The Vikings at number 5. At home, down and out Bears team. This is the game you wanted. 30-12 win. You never really found yourself in a situation where you were worried that the Bears might come back on you. I believe it was like 20-3 going into halftime, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. And then, or was it 13-3? I don't remember, but it felt like it never really felt like you were in danger of losing. Justin Jefferson dropped what could have been 6 points that ended up being like an interception a few plays later. If that doesn't happen, you basically leave 7 points on the board right there. Like, this game could have very easily been like a 37-12, just complete demolition, as if it wasn't already. Vikings are playing the way they should be right now. And at this point, it's crazy to me that there is a possibility. Let's say the Vikings lose one last game, and it's against the Detroit Lions. There is a real scenario where we are looking at a 14-win team not getting a bye week in the NFL. And that's if the Vikings only lose one more game. And let's say, hypothetically speaking, they beat the Lions, who are sitting just a few places above them in a few weeks. There is still the real possibility that a 14-win team does not get a bye week. Then there's also the even realer possibility that regardless of what happens between those two, you get a 14-win team in some capacity and the Eagles win out, that maybe they claim the number 1 seed. And again, you're looking at 14-win teams not getting a bye week. That's crazy. It's still the Detroit Lions number 1 seed to hold at this current moment here. I cannot believe that this is how competitive the top of the NFC is right now. You have 3 teams sitting at 12 wins right now. It is a horse race for that number 1 seed, and the Lions losing this week definitely complicated things for them. The Chiefs at number 4, 13-1. The Patrick Mahomes injury will definitely be something to watch. We've obviously seen this story before, but it is definitely something worth keeping an eye on with him dealing with a potential high ankle sprain. The defense came in, they took care of DTR, and they took care of Jameis Winston. 4 interceptions collectively between the 2 quarterbacks. They're 13-1, and I feel silly for not having them at the top of the league just based off the record alone, but at some point, this has got to give, and I'm really curious to see what they opt to do over the next few weeks, because right now, as it stands, the Bills are the next closest team behind the Chiefs, and the Chiefs could afford to realistically speaking, the Chiefs could sit Mahomes next week, lose the football game, and you're fine, because the Bills screwed up and lost to the Rams last week. So the Chiefs are in a really good spot right now where they could drop a game if they want to and just keep on rolling. It doesn't even matter, because you're 2 games up over the Bills right now. The Bills have the tiebreaker over them if they have the same record, but the Bills losing to the Rams last week really shot them in the foot, especially now, in hindsight, you have this big win over the Lions, too, in Detroit. Like, the Bills really let that game go again, get away from them against the Rams, and it was the ultimate trap game for them to lose. Really unfortunate there, but I don't know. The Chiefs are 13-1, man. It is what it is, and we're right back to the whole injured Patrick Mahomes situation going into the playoffs. And does it even really matter? I don't know. Is the injury even real? I don't know. Lions at number 3, sitting at 12-2. It's easy to point to the onside kick, with 12 minutes left to go in the game, and you're wondering, what the hell is that decision making? Like, why is Dan Campbell doing that? I think the real concern, though, the real conversation to have is just the injury on this defense. You lose Carlton Davis and Alim McNeil. At this point, I don't know how this defense doesn't break eventually. Like, next man up mentality. This is a tough-ass football team, and I get that. Believe me, I do. But at some point, you are going to run out of legit starting caliber players, and you already kind of are in Detroit. And something tells me that this is finally going to break. And I hate that, because this felt like Detroit's year. And it felt like they were rallying around the Aiden Hutchinson thing, but the injuries just continue to pile up, and you cannot really afford to lose anyone else. That's all speculation, hence why I still have them at number 3. I'm not going to drop them any lower, although it did prevent me from maybe just dropping them to number 2 and having like the Bills at number 1. But the injuries are definitely something of a concern with this defense over there. The Bills are sitting at number 2, and believe me, I wanted to put them at number 1, but the Bills, unfortunately, dropping that game last week and allowing that 40 burger that was put up on them by the Rams, and now another 40 or so points allowed by the Lions this week. The defense had been playing really good up until the last couple of weeks, and now I'm starting to wonder, is this defense good against average to below average teams, and then like high-powered offenses are going to give them problems? And is a winning formula just letting Josh Allen go out and be Superman? Because that's something I've kind of criticized Buffalo about a lot over the last handful of years that I've been doing this. So this will be something worth watching. Josh Allen absolutely deserves MVP, and major respect for going into Detroit and taking down the Lions. They literally, since Halloween of 2022, had 5 losses at home coming into this matchup here. The Bills now giving them their 6th. So odds were stacked against them. You have a very easy schedule the rest of the way. You get to beat up the Patriots twice, and sandwiched in between that, you get to beat up on the Jets as well. So easy road to the playoffs. You don't have to work yourself too hard, I would imagine, considering the opponents you have coming up here. But I do have some reservations right now just about this defense allowing 40 the last couple of weeks. We'll see if that, alleviates itself. But that was kind of the big thing that kept me from putting them at number 1. And then the Eagles, of course, rounding out the entire league at 12-2. 10 straight wins will earn you the number 1 spot. And seeing Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith as a trio work together when your ground game is not working nearly as successfully as it has been all season long, kind of go in and silence the doubters. Can Jalen Hurts throw the football? This team has no ability to pass. All of that noise that we've been hearing about Philadelphia the last basically season at this point now, it feels like you come in, you can't get it done on the ground, but with Jalen Hurts' arm and your 2 stud wide receivers, you're able to put up the points you need to get yourself a victory and claim Pennsylvania as yours. And this defense just continues, as we've been talking about. This defense looks like it has first-round selections coming from big-name schools like Alabama, like Georgia, as that talent continues to just round itself out into form. They look like all that investment is finally paying off, and they filled the holes they needed to fill this offseason with some unbelievable rookies. This team feels as complete as they come, and that is not where people thought this team was going to be coming into the season. The conversation about Nick Sirianni's job security was very loud. When they were 2-2, things were very loud in Philadelphia, but here we are, 12-2. Philadelphia takes the throne. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Those are my power rankings. And as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll catch you all next time. Have a good one.